All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sayard Bass. I am a speech pathologist, and I'm very excited to be coming and speaking to you today about one of my favorite documents that's come out this year, and that is the Myths and Facts document that has been published by OSEP. So just really quick to get started here, do those housekeeping things. I am a speech pathologist and an ATP. I work with a large cooperative south of the city of Chicago. I also do some adjunct instructing at the University of Illinois at Chicago in their AT certificate program, as well as at the College of DuPage in their SLPA program. I love speaking about AT, talking about AT. If you ever see me at a conference, please come up. We will chat about assistive technology or AAC. My main interests are transition, process, and capacity building. I've really enjoyed this summer with my husband and two kids, and I don't know, felt a little crazy and signed up for my first marathon. So I'm running all the time when I'm not doing AT stuff for Chicago 2024. So please think of me in October. As far as disclosures, my financial relationships, I do receive pay for being an adjunct instructor, as well as my full-time job at Southwest Cooperative. Non-financial, I am a member of RESNA with my assistive technology professional certification, as well as ASHA and ISHA, which is the Illinois Speech Language Hearing Association. All of the images that I used in this presentation, I am crediting, and I did reach out to authors for permission when I could identify original authors. So why this document? This Myths and Facts document was released in January by the Office of Special Education Programming, and it's really cool that we have this all kind of in one place. So why was this put out? The origin story of the Myths and Facts document is that assistive technology professionals were coming together and having a discussion that we were always kind of coming across the same questions and the same challenges to our recommendations, where we would say to a team, okay, this is what we need you to do. This is what the law says. And teams would give us the same pushback, and we would be going back and pulling up the same laws and coming back and making the same recommendations over and over again. So what was done was some requests were made if all of the laws could be put into something that could be organized into a nice document where all of the myths and all of the facts could be put into one place. And OSEP did that. They took all of the things that if you go through a certificate program or if you've gone through a lot of special education training, you are familiar with many of these laws. But they took all of those things and put them into a nice document. So this origin story is that it was from practical experience that a lot of people have, and a lot of the things that we're seeing in the field, in practice, as coming up as challenges to what we did on a daily basis. The organization of the document, it's set up in 5 nice, easy sections, and it's set up in just a very nice, here's the myth that we're seeing, here's the fact, and then it links straight to the laws that support what is coming back and supporting what the truth is. It's nothing new. No new laws were passed in the creation of this document. It's simply doing all the research for us and putting it in one place, which makes it nice, quick access. And the reason I like that is because sometimes when in the moment somebody says, okay, a student can't have this, and I say, actually, yes, they can. If my mind goes blank and I can't remember the exact section of IDEA and I'm sitting there flipping through my computer and someone else is continuing a conversation, it's nice to have this document right here in front of me. I have printed out many copies and put them in some nice folders. I carry them around with me and I pass them out to different LEAs and teams that I work with. And I always keep a copy on me so I can kind of just pull it out and reference it as soon as a situation might come up. It's very easy to understand. There's not a lot of jargon in here. When there are very specific terms, they're defined. So it's something that could be understood by somebody who has limited knowledge about assistive technology, or even someone who might not have a lot of knowledge about special education. And that's very important considering its purpose as well. And I'm a huge fan of this in consideration of advocacy. One of my goals as an assistive technology professional is not just to get tools into students' hands, but also to teach students how to become advocates for themselves, because I cover 11 school districts and 6 specialty programs. There's no way that I am in the room where it happens for every single person that I am supporting. So I want to make sure that I'm training each person along the way to become an advocate for themselves. And this document, I think, is a great handbook that someone can pull out for themselves if they are confronted with one of these myths when they don't have a professional, such as one of us attendees, here to back them up. So this is really a tool to create equity. It's meant to be understood by administrators who probably, if they are in special education, went through all of this in their training. If they are not in special education, likely not. But it should be understandable by the people who do hold the pocketbooks and the purse strings, also by the special educators and LEAs. There are still times when I'm working with special educators who have misunderstandings about what students are entitled to in their classrooms or what they should be adding into an IEP document. And having it written down from OSEP helps to clear up those discussions in a much easier way. It also can support the LEA or the local education representative at the table so that they can help bridge the family, the student, and your local education agency at the table so that everyone is on the same page. And then, of course, AT specialists, because we're always preaching everything we know about assistive technology, but there's always that key of trying to capacity build and help others to understand what we know. And this document is a lot of what we know put into one place. So this tool, this document, is something that I think will be just invaluable in your practice. And I'm glad that we have some time today to just kind of do a quick walk through it. As I said, there are 5 sections of this document. I did split up the presentation into 5 parts. And we will go through each of these myths and facts quickly. I will talk a little bit about how I've seen these present in real situations for those who might not have had a lot of experience with some of these myths and facts coming up in practice. If you have the document, there is a link to it in one of the handouts that I attached for this presentation. If not, the slides just kind of have the quick delineation of it. The slides are available through sites, the Center for Instructional Technology, and they're open for you to use if you want to continue presenting and sharing this with your organization. So that first section is talking about Part B of IDEA. And that mandates that we help all of our students ages 3 through 21 with their needs. This is also what mandates that we create individualized education plans and use the least restrictive environment. And I was having a little fun throughout creating this presentation and used a lot of things that might be considered myths or cryptids, fictional animals. Just kind of a little bit of a way to add a little bit of entertainment. And who knows, some of these might be real. So first myth is something that I think we all can agree on, is that AT is considered at some IEP meetings. We know from section 300 that it should be considered at every IEP meeting. And one thing that I see with this is teams will meet about a small change, like a student might be changing one of their special classes. They might be moving from music to art. And if assistive technology is not considered at that meeting, that means we might be missing an opportunity to accommodate the student, which might lead to problems down the road. So we need to make sure that even if it's a meeting for something that might be a small change, the team needs to know that assistive technology, if we are making changes in the tasks that the student is expected to do or the demands placed on the student or the environment for the student, we need to be looking at their assistive technology again. Might be a change, might not be, but it's helpful. Second, that providing AT devices and services is optional. Nope. Again, going back to that section 300 with which most AT practitioners are very familiar. It's necessary to provide that free and appropriate public education. It's very rare you will see an IEP that does not have any accommodations whatsoever. I am a big preacher of assistive technology is an accommodation with stuff, and that stuff allows students the greatest independence to accomplish things with their greatest level of independence. So we want to make sure that the students get the devices they need and the services they need to go along with that. And that continues to feed into the next myth that just providing them with the device meets the requirement. And this is where I think about the first time that my dad got an iPhone. If I provided my dad with an iPhone, yes, I got the requirement of providing my dad with a smartphone. If I did not give him the support of showing him how to use said smartphone, that thing would be at the bottom of the Illinois River right now. I will tell you, probably with a cracked screen. So we need to think when we give somebody a piece of technology, it's not enough to just say, here's your text to speech software. We need to show the student not only how to operate the software, but when they will need to operate it, how to operate it within class so that they feel comfortable using it when it might not be the tool that everybody else is using, how to advocate if a teacher stands up and says, oh no, you're not using that right now, because we need to make sure we're giving those supporting services to make it as successful as it needs to be. Oh, this is my favorite one. AT evaluation is required prior to provision of assistive technology. Nope. It can be included, but it is not required. This is one that I still argue a lot. And sometimes I feel that I'm arguing myself out of a job. We don't need to evaluate for assistive technology. Thinking about AT being an accommodation with stuff, if we look at any other accommodation that we provide to a student, how do we determine that we are going to provide said accommodation? There's no evaluation to say we are going to give extended time or we are going to make an environmental change. We simply say, okay, when we try this with the student versus not having that in place, the student performs better. When we do use an evaluation is when we don't know exactly what's going to work. What I will do is when I meet with a student, if I see immediately, okay, these are the tasks the student is having difficulty with in this environment, I usually have an idea what path to go down and I can immediately start trying some tools out with them. Most of the time I can leave with a student having something that they can put into place that day, and I can go back to my desk and write up the report that somebody might want as follow-up. But an evaluation is almost like this older idea of gatekeeping assistive technology. So we don't necessarily have to go through, in Illinois, we have something called opening domains to evaluate to get a piece of assistive technology, because where do we draw the line? The myth that children will learn to use the AT, so we don't need to train them. Yeah, the district is responsible for training the student, but also the parents and educators how to use the device. And this is important because we think about students and how easy is it for a student who might not want to do something to just say, I don't know how to do it. If a teacher is there who knows how to use the device, the teacher can coach them on it. If the student goes home at night and something goes awry, it's important for the parent to know how to use the device as well, whether it's a simple switch, whether it's a communication device, whether it's something as simple as an extension on a student's Chromebook. It's important for people to know how to do some basic troubleshooting with each program, because having that in place will give students what they need. Oh, yes. AT decisions don't need to be documented in IEP. While we may disagree about where and how to document things in the IEP, IDEA does require that we document AT decisions on the IEP. And a lot of times I will say to people, this is because every school is different. What we do in our classrooms as second nature isn't going to look the same as the school even down the road. So we need to make sure that we are being clear. And if your organization doesn't have clear guidelines about where to document something in the IEP, make sure you're at least putting something in the present levels. Talk about what the student uses, how they set it up. Do they need assistance setting it up? Is it something that they enjoy using, something that they hate to use? You're writing in the present levels. It's simply what the student does at that point in time. You're being descriptive. Oh, yes, AT does not need to be considered in secondary transition. This is a passion of mine. AT should be considered and included on the transition plan because once a student leaves IDEA, once they've graduated from the services under Part B, they lose their rights under IDEA and are then supported under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And under this, when they're moving into the workplace, when they're moving into supported work environments or into adult services, there aren't as many human supports. Students need assistive technology in order to succeed in collegiate environments, work environments, uh, anything outside of the educational environment that they've enjoyed K through 12 or K through transition. So it's important that it's documented in the transition plan so that students know and can continue with what they need as they have progressed on to that next level. This one I hear a lot from teachers. They'll say, oh, well, they can't use that AT on a state assessment. And to me, it's like saying, okay, so I have a student I compare things to wheelchairs a lot because wheelchairs are highly visible. Uh, it's like saying, okay, well, I've let a student use a wheelchair to get around the school, but then all of a sudden I'm going to say, okay, now you get out of that wheelchair and I need you to run the mile in gym. No, that's not going to happen. States are required to provide appropriate accommodations for assessments, including assistive technology. There may be additional paperwork to figure out, and there are within this document links to the laws that demonstrate that. And most schools that I've been at do have someone in the special education department assigned to filling out those forms. So making sure that students get those accommodations that they need is important, because if they all of a sudden are told to run the mile without the accommodations that they have, how is the student going to be able to perform? How are they going to be able to do what they need to do without the accommodations that they've come to expect? They can still get extended time. They can still have a separate environment. So it makes sense that they should have the other accommodations that they're used to using. So that was the first section. It's a big one. I know that there's a few things coming up in the chat. I will take a look at them. My goal is to leave some time here at the end. So we'll come into the second section here on AT devices and services. And this helps to clarify some misconceptions about tools and services and about AT and when it should be implemented. And this is something that I see varying just throughout districts. And I think people have gotten a lot better about it, especially over the last 10 years, and especially as we've gotten to more one-to-one initiatives. And, I say, AT, we've gotten some of the crazy blessings of COVID because more people are familiar with technology and using it. But let's take a look at a few of the things they've put in about AT and services to support us in this myths document. So first off, AT is always high tech. Nope, it can be low, mid, or high tech. This is where I tell people, if you have a switch that you need for a student in a class, write it in their IEP. That way, if you show up next year and your switch is broken, you have something to go up to your supervisor and say, hey, even if this wasn't in your budget, you need to buy me a switch. I've had social workers put students' visual schedules in here, even things like such as a self-soothe kit. If it is something physical that a student needs, I tell people, think about that AT box as a shopping list. If you are going to have to go out and buy something and the school should be paying for it, put it in that box. Because if it is a supply that is essential to that student's success, whether it's low tech or mid tech or high tech, it should be in that assistive technology box. It should only be considered for certain children. Yes, certain children, meaning every child with an IEP. This is where we have to think about every student with an IEP. may benefit from having something to help them accomplish their educational goals. And that something could be a tool that could make them independent. We know we have aides, we know we have people, we know we have a lot of fantastic people who work in education who can help kids, but we want to make sure that they start off as independent as possible. AT devices and services are only for use at school. Nope. AT should be used across all environments to ensure that the learners are supported. And in this, I think about when we have students who are working on anything, we send home homework. We make sure that students are able to generalize things across environments. A lot of times I get people scared, oh, the device is going to get broken, it will get stolen, it won't come back. I've had a lot of people say, oh, can we have a letter that we can have the family sign just to make sure that we have somebody responsible for the device? And it's, kind of on the edge of things. The family cannot be held financially responsible for that device being lost or broken, but you can have something. We have an agreement that says, the family will send the device back charged. If the family moves out of the district, they will return the device. It's not something legally binding, but it's something that shows we've had a conversation and we've had some of those considerations. But we do want the learner generalizing. We do want the learner getting additional practice, and we do want the parents to know how to use the device too, and hopefully to see the importance and the success of it as well. AT's tool selection does not need to be individualized. I see this one a lot because we might have something sitting around that works really well and it's just sitting there. But devices should be individualized to the child's specific needs. I will say, if something is sitting there, I will try it. Like if a student needs a tool and it is the right type of tool, we can give it a try. But if it isn't the match for the student, um, then we will keep looking or exploring for the tool that is more individualized towards that student. And this could be anything from a tool for academics to a tool for physical needs. Of course, so as tools for physical needs, we want to make sure that we're keeping the student physically safe as well. But it's very important that we kind of make sure that we are individualizing, because that's the first word for individualized education plan. Accessible technology and AD are the same thing. I hear this a lot. People will say, oh, well, we use principles of UDL when we're setting up our classrooms, so everyone's accommodated. And in fact, accessible technology does support a lot of students, but assistive technology supports an individual. And when we have UDL, when we have everything accessible, that's really great. But what happens is we might be kind of accommodating for everybody, and it might help that student in that moment, but that student moves on to the next year and they're not accommodated in that room. So we need to make sure that even if the students' needs are accommodated in that environment, that the student knows what their needs are and how to accommodate them even if they're in another area. So this is a nice chart that is within the document that just kind of gives the differences between looking at AT, which is individualized, the concept of universal design, versus using the framework of universal design for learning within a classroom, and having the idea of accessible educational materials, where you're making sure that everything you use within the classroom is kind of set up so that all students can access that. So having all of these things kind of parsed out as different definitions can be a good thing to say to a teacher. I really love and enjoy what you're doing with UDL in your classroom. However, we need to make sure that the student still understands what their AT needs are and what their AT is. And yes, you might be doing their AT as part of your UDL, but the student still needs to know and own what is theirs. Using AT will not improve a child's outcomes. There are many studies that show that outcomes are improved across all settings when we give students that assistive technology. Using AT lowers a child's motivation. I've seen quite the reverse. There are some students who at first feel self-conscious. There are students at first who have told me this is dumb or this sucks. I let them pretty much tell me what they think. But once they realize they can accomplish the task or it makes the task easier, students really have such increased motivation and, dare I say it, I see just a lot more smiles and a lot more self-esteem happening when students have that increased motivation because it's easier. The child doesn't want to use the AT, we don't push it. I will say I don't push it hard, but if a child's reluctant, we have to find and address the barrier. This is where I've learned um, social workers are my friends when it comes to assistive technology, which I never really would have thought like of a social worker being on the team when I'm looking at AT. But sometimes, especially with students who have some social emotional needs prior to using AT, I will talk to their social worker before getting everything put together uh, to put a tool in front of the student because we want to make sure that we're raising the chances of the student adopting the tool that they need. Okay, the school is less responsible if the child uses their own AT. AT devices and services are the responsibility of the LEA, so that local education agency is responsible. I will say there are some devices that even if the parent has their own insurance, I will say to the parent, you know what, this might be something good for the family to own, but ultimately, if it comes down to there's still a copay or there's still something coming down at the end, there should be an agreement between the parent and the school because it should not be costing them to get something that will ultimately accommodate the student at school. And these are agreements that should be worked out between the parent and the school district individually. And are some there is some guidance within this document on that. But it does come down to individual cases when you're looking at those sorts of things, such as if a parent sends a child in their own wheelchair to school. Um, we want to make sure that we're respecting the equipment, taking care of the equipment. I've seen schools sometimes cover the warranties, schools sometimes cover copays, but in the end, sometimes it is beneficial for the family to own the equipment. Sometimes it's beneficial for the school to own the equipment, though that is individualized on a case-by-case basis. Deploying a oh, this is where we have to cooperate a lot with our friends in the information and instructional technology, sometimes getting things out. And there are some new laws that have come out as far as with COPA, and in Illinois, we have SOPA, which is another layer of protection for student information, which hasn't blocked a lot of things in AT world, but it has kind of added another documentation step in terms of getting things out for students. So first, the child can wait for their AT while the district works with the company to acquire it. It has to be made available to the child as soon as possible. And this is where people have said, but Sayard, if we don't have it, we don't have it. And agreed. I totally understand the logic in that. But what we can do is we can document what we're doing in order to get it and what we are doing for the student in the interim. And that could be, okay, well, we're waiting on that text to speech software, but while that is happening, we are using an alternative program that maybe doesn't have a voice that is preferred by the child. Maybe we are using a human reader for the student until we are able to get what we need. Maybe we are using modifications of the curriculum until we can get what we need for the student. So we have to document what we're doing if it is taking us time to acquire it, because that is a real thing. But the fact is we have to get it as soon as possible. IT must approve all AT. The IEP determines what AT device is needed. I've been in districts that are one-to-one on Chromebooks and a student needs an iPad. I've been in districts that are one-to-one with iPads and a student needs a Chromebook. The IEP is what determines what the student needs. And this one I've pulled out a couple times even since January. And it's been great to pull it out in this OSEP document because before, even when I pulled it up on the website, I still got some questions coming back. So for some reason, having a document in a folder that I printed out has been a nice little backup for me. Only AT professionals can provide AT devices and services. Oh no, I would require a lot more vacation if it was just me running around doing it all. I encourage the general educator, special educator, related services provide that AT. If it's a tool for reading, I encourage the reading specialist. If it's a tool to help a student with their writing, I encourage their English teacher, resource teacher, OT, someone to get on board with helping the student. If it's a communication device, I definitely tell the SLP, like, hey, you're going to be doing some assistive technology work, because definitely all of this comes together and it's not just one AT person, because AT people can have a variety of backgrounds. So it's not just us doing it all. Another myth is we don't have AT resources in our state. Oh, every state has a program. It's federally funded, and that is one of the links that is on the handout, the AT3 centers. You can look up your states. I just looked up the one in Oregon for my uncle who's out there now. So it's a very handy website when you have people out of state that you're trying to find something for. Part C, this is the little ones. And to me, this is where I think we get a lot of bang for our buck, because honestly, when we see students using something younger and younger, whether it's a wheelchair, whether it's a communication device, this is when we really see a student truly integrating assistive technology into their life. So children birth to 3 don't benefit from AT. Well, it does support children birth to 3. This is where there's Project Go Baby Go, where you see kids starting to drive around little motorized cars, which leads to them having better wheelchair mobility. There are young children who can learn how to use communication devices. There's a lot of myths surrounding that these things will delay children, but instead it allows them access to so many more skills. Part C doesn't require AT. Actually, it does. IDEA regulations include those devices and services as part of early intervention. So if a student's getting services through early intervention, they can get AT. It should be considered at preschool transition because a student is starting to get that IFSP or moving towards an IEP. So we do have to consider AT. And early intervention isn't supported by state AT programs. Oh, they are cradle to grave. So they serve individuals of any age. So that was really quick, just that assistive technology can be at any age for the people that we support. And this last one is a big one, and that is the costs and funding sources. Now, a lot of times I hear people coming in and saying, okay, so this is really expensive. Is this something that we are going to need for this student? It's a lot to spend on one student. What are we going to do? So with this, we're just going to highlight some of the myths and facts surrounding funding, and I'm going to go just a little bit deeper into this. So for funding sources, there's actually money set aside for students under the different parts of IDEA, and that Part B and Part C. So, oops. So the first one is AT is expensive. That's a myth that I think is left over kind of from the earlier days of AT. I think a lot of our people who use AT, thinking back to, back when people who used assistive technology might have been the ones with a computer when nobody else had a computer. Maybe the people with assistive technology were the ones with the high-tech device when nobody else had a high-tech device. Assistive technology can be little to no cost or not expensive at all. The prices on everything are coming down. I know sometimes even when we are sending devices home with students, there is a big concern from parents about the cost of breakage or the cost of something not coming back. And I say, what we have funding to pay for these things, we have funding to replace these things. And the family is not responsible for those costs. If a student, let's say, gets a hold of a bulldozer and runs over an iPad, I'm not so concerned about the cost of replacing the iPad. I'm more concerned about how A, the student got a hold of a bulldozer, and B, the reason behind why that happened. So when we think about it, for infants and toddlers, Part C grants support those early intervention um, costs. And then for students who get AT as part of their IEP, the Part B grants are used as funding sources. So that assists states and LEAs in providing FAPE. So those are the two grant programs that should cover the majority of costs. There are a lot of ways to get creative, which we can go to the next slide on that. And no, we don't all have men spinning straw into gold for us. I've seen everything from people doing sponsorships, people going to local Lions clubs for AAC devices, reaching out to Rotary clubs, doing a 5K for a wheelchair van. There are many funding sources out there. And I know that OSEP and different programs also have some suggestions for this. The last page on page 20 of the document also has a list of those things as far as grants and subgrants that are usually accessed more by the administrators in our special educations departments. So what do we do with all of this information? We just got all this information that was nicely outlined for us, 20 pages. It's nice to print out, carry around in a folder, show off to all of your friends. So what do we do with it? My first recommendation is to keep a copy at the table at every IEP conference. It's nice to just have in the conference room. I don't really recommend printing out a copy and giving it to every parent, simply because parents leave with half a tree from every IEP meeting anyway. You can always say, we can happily provide you with a copy, but I think having a copy just kind of as a reference manual, thinking about it as, you know, the old days when we'd have a dictionary and a thesaurus sitting around in the classroom, just having that copy there would be a good use for this guidance manual, because if one of those myths were to come up, you have the quick reference of what the facts are, as well as some further information about it. Secondly, giving every administrator a copy. And when I say every administrator, I'm thinking even like our director of IT. I think he was kind of like, oh yeah, thanks. But I wanted to make sure that he had a copy. So if we were emailing back and forth on something, I could reference and say, oh yeah, like take a look at, I'm just flipping over here. Page 4, we have to include this in the IEP document. And so I need to make sure I know the brand name of this so we can put it into the IEP under the current levels. Make sure to add it to any process manuals that you have for special education or assistive technology. I know that right now we kind of integrate our AT processes into our special education manual, but it's kind of nice. You could even have it as just kind of an appendix or something so that it's accessible to all of the special educators that you have in your departments. And this is where make sure all of your special educators know where to access the document. We get a hold of so many documents. So it might be nice to just have it something that they have ready to draw up, because there's so many things to remember while writing an IEP. I always try to, temper everything I say when I'm doing trainings with teachers with, you guys have so many things to remember. And I know I'm over here so excited about AT and you have so many other things to remember, but as long as you know where to go and reference, I'm happy. And that goes to capacity building, because as long as they know when to phone a friend or they know where to go to reference, I feel like I've done my job with capacity building. Because if they know where that fishing hole is, if they know where to go get a drink, they at least know that they should be doing something. And then I also have thought for implementation, sharing sections with general education teachers, because sometimes our most successful students, the ones who are going to the very least restrictive environment, are the ones who get questioned the most about their assistive technology. I still have a lot of very deep conversations with teachers about, you know, is something cheating or is something accommodating? And yes, it's accommodating if it's assistive technology. If a student has an IEP, I'm going to be there advocating for the student to use it and teaching the student to advocate for themselves as well. So sharing this document around, it's nice, it looks official, and it will help to back you up. The graphics used throughout this presentation are from sites, and I did put that link in your handout as well, and they have those available to you. So I would recommend, if you get time at a department meeting or you get a little newsletter you can hand out, or even if you're not the AT person, if you are a special educator, if you get some kind of newsletter or someplace you get a little bit of a platform, pop a myth and a fact in there every once in a while. It's nice. This breaks down to 28 of them. I know that with our school year, we have 36 weeks. So even if you just pop one a week in there about this is a myth and this is a fact about assistive technology, it's very digestible. Um, you can even use their visuals. They are there to download, and they even made it nice and accessible. They have the alt text there that you can download as well. Um, Even if you go online, other practitioners have created a lot of fun graphics, even like brochure style cheat sheets that they can put out for parents to summarize this information. If you go to OSAP, they have it in both English and Spanish already translated, so you don't have to do any of the work on the back end with that. So they have made this very accessible. Get that to the parents, and like I said, give them what is needed but also what is wanted. If you just hand it to them with no explanation, it's just another pile of papers that, if they're feeling very motivated and organized, they will put in their IEP portfolio. If they are not, they will put it in the pile of IEP stuff that is just going to lead to them feeling very exhausted. You can always take one of those nice little graphics or handouts. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. People have made a lot of them. um, but you could do something like that, maybe highlighting the questions that they've had, um, to really support, because that's the purpose of this document, is really to bring together everybody at the table and to make sure that these things that I've heard every question in here, every myth in here asked and presented at different times, even between January and now. They're all very common things that come up in the day-to-day life of an assistive technology professional. And I would imagine probably for many of you as well. I do see the chat kind of growing down there. So we're going to get to that very shortly. This is also something I've tried to be more conscientious of as I've moved through my career. AT is not the whole IEP. I know, but it is an accommodation. It's an accommodation with stuff, and it can make so many things possible. Um, and I always think that AT consideration is just as, if not more important than the goals in an IEP. And the reason that I believe this is we're working on goals, we're working on educating a student, but assistive technology is taking into account the skills that a student has right now in their environment with the tasks and expectations that they have at the current time. If a student's not reading at grade level, assistive technology hopefully can find a way for them to access grade level texts. Grade level texts occur not just in reading class, but in science. They can be in word problems in math class. They can be in sex ed, which, you know, that's fun for any kid of that age. They can be in biology. They can be across so many subjects. And so while that student is working on that one reading goal, AT can give them access to so many other things across the curriculum. And so I always think that it's an accommodation, but it's the accommodation that's going to open so many doors for that task that the student needs to do. So yes, I know there's more than AT to the IEP, but we want to make sure that we are making the most consideration of that. I will go over a couple of the links on the handout as well before I get into that Q&A. I know I did put in there a few resources that I like to use. Um, I will pull up that handout before we go into the Q&A, but here I did like to keep up with my theme of the cryptids and everything, and the truth is out there. You can tell I was a 90s kid, right? Bring up that document. Actually, I will go to questions first because I closed the document. So let's see what we have. Okay, so coming here, thank you for coming. Okay. Okay. Hi, Katie. There's the handout there. So important. Agreed. Thank you. Does this also apply to augmentative and augmentative alternative communication devices? Yes, that does fall under the assistive technology umbrella. When it does come to the evaluation question, that's something that one of the SLPs I work with did bring up to me. They said, okay, so we do have to evaluate for AAC devices. And I said, yes, there are a lot of things we do have to do to evaluate for AAC devices. However, writing up that final report should not be kind of a gatekeeping mechanism to say we're not going to give something to the student. Um, there are some times where, I use the report to say these are all my observations and findings, and that's why logically I want to try these 2 or 3 devices. But ultimately, my goal is to get something in a student's hands as quickly as possible. So that's the one. When it comes to AAC, I want to make sure that I'm still being cognizant that we do need to try a couple different things out, or we need to find the best fit for a student. And sometimes AAC devices get more complicated. Sometimes they aren't. I mean, sometimes you walk up to a student, you're just like, I know what you need, buddy. And they take off with it, and it's kind of scary. Good scary, but kind of scary. But I will say AAC does fall under the AT umbrella. That's a good question. Thank you for
And
the hand.
Sayard, if you click on the Q&A box at the bottom bar, you have some questions on that too. Just letting you
Oh,
know.
okay. All right. Might move this around. You guys, this is what I love about sharing my screen. You guys get to see my little dance here. Oh, here we go. All right, there we go. How do you pronounce your name? Oh, Sayard. Yes. It's like scared without the C. I think that's what turned me into a speech pathologist. Um, would you do AAC assessment and feature matching for high-tech devices? Again, yes, definitely would still do that, but I wouldn't let it be the one thing that kind of stopped me from getting something into the student's hands. Okay, this next one I think is a good question. For AT devices that go home and are reprogrammed by the family, what would be appropriate wording to add to the IEP to indicate families should not be deleting apps or adding non-school, non-educationally related items, YouTube, video games on AAC devices? This is when we will sit down. Like I said, we do have an agreement letter that we use, even though it's not something legally binding or financially responsible, where we do say, like, this is used for communication. And many districts do have iPad management systems where they can lock into a single app. If you do not, there are a few things you can do on the iPad, which can be helpful with that. Basically, we use every trick we can on the iPad to lock them into that app. If there are pictures being taken, I've had a few different responses situations dependent on the student and the program that they're in. There is one student where we've sat down and had multiple conversations with the family because some of the pictures being taken were age appropriate, but at the same time, when you get to that 14, 15-year-old level, we know what kind of things 14 and 15-year-olds do because their brains aren't really there yet for any 14 or 15-year-olds. So we start talking to them a little bit more about like, this is an educational tool that belongs to the school and these are the expectations. So we start kind of adding a little bit to that agreement about this is what's allowed and not allowed on the device. Also, if you are a one-to-one school or you have those tools within your district, we'll pull in like any district technology policies as well, is something that we can do with that. But that is definitely something I've also seen issues with. I worked in an outside clinic actually, and the school district and I were collaborating, but there was an outside BCBA who was also programming some things in, and we had the school district and I had a goal of negation, and they programmed a toy button over the word no. So that was problematic. So we had to have a real come to the table moment about that because it eliminated an educational goal essentially. So I think just the appropriate wording would be looking at, district technology policies require that this is used for educational enrichment. And so we need for the student to be remaining within their communication app in order to receive the full benefit. Which, I know once communicators do, get to further proficiency, it is great to be able to go in and out of apps, but ultimately in those learning phases, it is important to, be able to learn. What are the major problems associated with the use of AT devices? I would say abandonment is the biggest thing I see. Abandonment of the device is huge. And I would say from the school perspective, just the perception that the device is cheating. And I think just changing the mindset that the device is not cheating, it's kind of replacing a skill that a student might not be able to use is important. And I think that abandonment wise is finding those core reasons of why a student might not be using their tool is important. Literature about parents not being required to be financially responsible if the device is broken outside of school. I'm just kind of flipping through because in our myths and facts, let me see, it's in that financial section. This is me live. If you go to part 5 with the common myths and facts about assistive technology costs and funding sources, there's something under part B that I think you have to go a little deeper than what the summary is in here, where it will go a little bit deeper with that. But it's something about part B funds. And I can follow up a little further with you on that. And Beth says, you said the IEP determines the device. At my last school district, we were not allowed to specify Chromebook, iPad, or any brand. This is the interesting thing when we are documenting in IEPs, typically when we are in the AT box, what we will do is we will be vague, quote unquote, where we will put laptop or tablet or word processor. But then in current levels, I will always say, write down the actual device that a student is using. So we can write down the device that a student is familiar with. That's my guidance to our district. But like I said, each district might do different things. I usually use the exact brand name in the current levels, just because I want them to know what specific tool the student is used to using at this current time. Joan is asking, Will Medicare pay for 2 devices at home and at school? If not, are they funding? Oops, it jumped a little bit. Are they funding? Are there any funding an SLP can apply for? Usually Medicare and insurance will not pay for 2 devices. In terms of that, the school will be responsible. I have had families who will purchase something and not send it to school. And in that case, the school is still responsible for providing a device at school. With that, I've always encouraged SLPs to make sure that the devices look as similar as possible. If we can possibly go in through something like iShare or the cloud or some kind of syncing mechanism to try and I'm guessing we're discussing AAC devices here to make sure that they mirror each other. That's something I want to make sure that that way the student has some continuity. So that is something that I do see happen sometimes. Do we just download it from the slides or can you send us the link to it? I think in the handout, there is a link to the Department of Education and the OSEP site where you can get the myths and facts, as well as a link to the site's page where all of the slides are that I used. And those are open and available for anyone to use. From California, my previous district allowed me to complete a medical AAC report. Okay. Yes. I have had districts vary on this, where some school districts will say that you can complete the medical AAC report so the family can own the device. And I have had some districts say, you know, that's going to be a waste of time. As long as the district is providing a device, I guess they have some say over how you spend your time, but typically the reports I write would be usable for funding, either way, regarding how I would put that together. So I think we're talking to the new school district, just saying like, hey, if we do this, you know, we don't really want to approach it necessarily from a cost saving measure, but just saying to the district, you know, it's beneficial for the family to own the device if they were to move. It gives the student more continuity. It gives the family that history of understanding what they're going to need to be doing. I mean, honestly, if I had a child who needed a high-tech communication device, I would want to own it. And I think that the family should have the option of that, or even just saying to your boss, the report I write anyway is the report that would help with that. I know we are approaching 1 o'clock here, and I'm happy to go through and answer the remainder of the questions. So I can stick around for a few more minutes. I just wanted to make sure to get through the questions. And if anybody did need to hop off at 1, I wanted to just say thank you. I'll just get back into questions really quick. Piggybacking off of Katrina's questions, how would I justify in an IEP if the device is an open device? My friend is a special education teacher and has had this issue before and has been questioned on the device being solely an iPad. Okay, so if a student has something that's completely open, and I'm guessing discussing as something that's an AAC device, I think that if you are writing in into the IEP, you know, the student is using this as their AAC device, and as part of their AAC usage, they are doing things such as, and then naming what features of the device. For example, I have a student right now who, and this is an adult, so this is outside of the school realm, but if he were in a school, I would think he is typing out text messages on his iPad within his communication software, and then he is able to text them from his communication app to other people. He is also able to type things out in his communication app and then email them. So I think just saying like he's using features of emailing, composition software, etc., putting some of those things, just what is the purpose of having the open device, I think would add to the justification. Sorry, I just lost my place. Is the SLP the main point of contact regarding AAC, or is there usually an AET provider involved? I usually try to go ahead and let the SLP be the point of contact because they are the person who sees the client regularly and sees the client on the most consistent basis. So I try to allow them to be the main point of contact, though I stay as a backup. I know that different AT people might have different kind of viewpoints on that, but I usually try to transfer that responsibility over to the main or treating SLP. But will provide my information and kind of try to be a backup for the family as well. Stacy, that's a great question. Is AT consideration included in 504 plans too? Yes, there is a document, Quality Indicators of Assistive Technology in 504 plans by Aaron Marsters and Gail Bowser. I think it can be found off of the quiet.org website that includes some of the things that should be considered with AT and 504s. So that's a really good question. Is it legal for a district to keep a district purchased device at school at all times and not sent over and home? Okay, at home every night or on the weekends as well as over summer? What should a district do if a family is not charging a device or sending it to school regularly? So in the myths and facts, it does say that the device should be able to go home with the student, very similarly to a textbook. So in the myths and facts, it does direct that the device should be sent home with the student, and that adds to the generalization of skills and also adds to if the student is doing homework and they need it to access their work, that they should be able to have it. And if the family's not charging it or sending it to school regularly, I almost think of that as a behavioral problem. And it's almost like we don't want to have a behavioral plan, quote unquote, for parents, but it's almost when you want to have a meeting with the parents to say, let's go ahead and discuss what's going on. If we have something that's not coming in charged regularly, we do have some charging packs we keep around. Or if it's on an iPad, we usually have a backup one that we keep in the classroom. But yeah, it is something to troubleshoot around. And in my mind, I always kind of think of it as, okay, we have a behavior and how are we going to address the behavior in a way, kind of like what's leading to it and what can we do to get around it. So it is one of those really frustrating things that comes up. And I didn't say this before, but I probably should have. I am not a lawyer. I think I said I didn't want to be a lawyer, but just these myths and facts are really great for supporting. But okay, I have a student who consistently reprograms their device when taken home from school. Guided access helps in most cases. Oh yes. However, some students have found a loophole and wait until the device dies, and then once it is restarted, when charging, guided access is turned off. Yes, that is fun. It depends on the communication app that you are using. But some of them, if you go into the iPad settings themselves, you can turn off editing as well as turning off editing or blocking the menu when you are in a, as well as when you are in the app. So it depends on which app you are using, but several apps have a few things built into the settings where you can also lock the student in. The other thing we have started doing is doing an iCloud backup. And one of our SLPs is actually really fast at going and just restoring the last backup. But it's very interesting how sometimes students who I have trouble getting to put a couple phrases together can go in and reprogram a whole device in an evening. I think, oh, you've got some good fine motor skills. Good question. Is there a limit on funding? I work at a special needs charter school where I'd say approximately 60% of the students need some level of AAC. I'm new there, but traditionally the school AT department goes through the family's insurance for funding. Okay. limits on funding, it's really going to depend on the funding source and which family and kind of what the family has. I know it's just going to depend on what insurance they have and what the funding source is. Though ultimately, charter schools being non-public, it's probably going to go back to the child's home district, home school, I believe. And that's just me saying I believe from my experience in my state and my location. But I do not believe there is a limit on funding with that. And then is it okay to use this slide presentation when we do present professional development at our own school? Yes, I am fine with sharing this. Like I said, I got the slides, the majority of them from the site's website. They have them up there to borrow and use, and I am happy to share what is here. I think that capacity building and making people aware of this manual and or of this document is just very important. So feel free. And how can we access the recorded webinar to refer back to? And I think that might be a good question for our AbleNet friends.
Yes, it will be available tomorrow, probably around this time on our YouTube channel. So you can find it if you go to the AbleU website and click on the YouTube channel from there, or just go to the AbleU YouTube channel and you can find it there as well.
Okay. And that was a
Awesome. Well, looks like we got to the end of the Q&A session. Sayard, is there anything else you wanted to add?
well, I think that's about it. I was just going to say, I know the handout that is here. I did list a few of the things. I know people sometimes will say, what do you use for assistive technology? I just listed a few things, SET, GPAT, WADI, as well as this task demand analysis, this website by Daniel Cochran. I really, really enjoy just, he kind of walks through considering assistive technology in an IEP. So I just wanted to share out those resources as well, kind of highlight those. That's about it.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sayard, for a wonderful presentation today. If you would like to earn ASHA CEUs for today's session, please remember to complete the assessment. You can find the link to the assessment in the chat, or you will also be redirected to the post-session page once this webinar ends, and you can find the link there. The link to the assessment will also be included in the follow-up email that will go out tomorrow. So the assessment must be completed at 80% or better and will remain open for 1 week. Thank you for attending, and we hope you will join us for another AbleU session very soon.